celebrating 10 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, Joe Clayton.
Welcome to another edition of Anything is Possible. These are great stories about great people who prove with their lives that anything is possible. My guest today is Mr. Joe Clayton. Mr. Clayton, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, thank you.
I'm going to say a word,
Okay.
and I would love to get your first response to it. Sharecropper.
Sharecropper. Well, that's what we were when we grew up in West Tennessee.
For people for the uninitiated, what is a sharecropper?
That's where you cultivate someone else's land and share in the profits of that land.
What were you guys growing?
Growing cotton and corn.
So you guys were picking cotton, growing corn.
Right.
Tell me about growing up like that.
Well, you just learn to do it. That's what your parents did. So you learn to work hard. Takes a lot of hours each day. And from there, you hope you're going to make some money that next year.
So walk me through an average day that you remember. What was that
day.
lifestyle like?
Well, I'll talk about when I was in high school, junior high in Finger, Tennessee. I would get up of a morning about 5:45, go to the school and fire up the heaters, particularly in the wintertime, back to the house, and always had some cows to milk or some hogs to feed, and then back off to school. And sometimes I had to do the dishes because my mother was working at a shirt factory, and so I had to have them ready for her when she came back in the evening. Of course, Jim was involved in all of these issues as I talk about them. And then at night, of course, we had to work in the fields, and then back and feed the hogs, milk the cows, and do it all over the next day.
What was it like to pick cotton?
Pick cotton. Well, it's very difficult. You learn to do it to miss the burrs because you're all the time punching up your fingers as you pick. You drag the cotton behind you until your bag is filled, and then you take it to the wagon and weigh it and load it on the wagon.
Now, as you're living this kind of lifestyle, the lifestyle of a sharecropper, and you're working through that, did you have any visions of your life becoming what it has become? I mean, how far could you see out in the future, and what did you think your future was going to be, and what was the typical future for a couple of sharecroppers growing up in a family in Finger, Tennessee?
Well, actually, what could I see? For many years, I guess I thought that the farming might be my game, but as I began to go through high school, read books, learn what was going on in the world outside, it became very clear that if a person wanted to make a good living, that they couldn't do it on the farm. And so when I was graduating from high school from Chester County High, it became obvious so I went to business college.
Now, how'd you get to the business college, and your parents, how did they feel about you leaving the farm and going off to Nashville? Was that something like, yeah, you need to take advantage of this opportunity, or was there any?
Well, I had earned some payments on my schooling that encouraged me to go, and so I was very lucky. After I arrived, I studied hard. I got a job at the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. I was an elevator boy and hauling people out at night, and so I was able to study at night. Even they were courteous enough to give me an office to work out of, and so it worked out real good. So I finished that school in about half time. So left there, and Jim came along and picked me up in Jackson, Tennessee, and brought me to Knoxville then.
Now, Jim Clayton is your brother. What's the difference in age?
21 months to the day.
What's the difference in personality?
Oh, gosh. Jim is more outgoing. He Of course, he's a singer. He's a guitar player. I don't do that because I learned early I couldn't tune a guitar, so I never tried to learn that. I have done commercials on TV during the car business and so forth, but not. Jim is more outgoing than I am.
Older, younger?
He's older.
He's older. All right,
Yeah.
so you're the baby brother.
He might deny that, but it's okay.
So, all right, so you get to Knoxville. Your brother brings you to Knoxville. Why did he bring you to Knoxville?
Well, I guess I'd have to leave that up to him, but we were always very close and had become close even while I was working in Nashville. I came to Knoxville. He was working here. So it just became the natural thing, I guess. He taught me into coming to UT. He didn't think that business college was enough, and I agree with him. It wasn't. So I came to UT and with him.
What'd you study here?
Studied business.
And after you finished UT, what was next on the horizon?
Well, actually, I did not quite finish UT. The business came along in '57, and I knew that there was some problems with the business at that point in time because of some wrecks that had occurred. And so I just eased out of school and began helping him in the business.
All right, so why don't we take a break here? When we come back, you describe it as the business, but we're talking about the car business.
Yes.
And you've been in the car business over 50 years.
Yes.
All right, so I want to talk about how you come here to go to school. Your big brother kind of put you in the car business, and that's a great story. We'll get to that in just a moment. Joe Clayton is my guest. You're watching Anything is Possible. More in a moment.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
In order to pay off our debts and so forth, that I had to go to work. And I liked selling cars. I really enjoy it, still do.
Welcome back to Anything is Possible. My guest this week is Joe Clayton. So we were talking about the business. Came to UT at your brother's request, and you end up in the car business. Now, you guys had spent some time, though, in the TV world.
Right. Well, actually, Jim purchased a very nice Studebaker, two-tone Studebaker, very nice car. And he assured me that he couldn't make the payments, so he conned me into taking over his payments, which I was happy to do until I figured out how hard it was to make those payments. So I sold that car, and he had actually taken one that I had in on trade, and he sold it. So it made it sound very easy. So I sold the Studebaker, and it was easy. And so from there, we started selling some cars on the side. And
where would you get the cars?
Well, we ran into a friend. He would take us down to the North City to buy them. And so we'd buy cars in his name, bring them back to Clinton Highway and sell them. So that's the way we got into the business. And
it just, now you did it out of necessity though, because you needed money. Was that the?
It was a real necessity, yes.
Right, so you start in the car business and you guys go, picking cotton, sharecropping, selling cars.
Well, I guess that did cross our mind along the way.
Do the math.
And the car business was pretty good in those days, back in '57, '58.
So you come into the business. Now you said you took over the business, you started running the business, and you said it was in a little bit of trouble. I think you mentioned a couple of wrecks.
Yes, well, it was some cars, Volkswagens that had been purchased down in Jacksonville, Florida, and they were driving them back, and some accidents occurred. And so I felt like it was time for me to jump in full time. Jim had actually started the business. So, in fact, it was named Jim Clayton Motors at that time.
So you come into the business, and did you think you'd be there for 50 years? I mean, did you think this would be your life, your career?
Well, I learned in '61, after some business failure there, that in order to pay off our debts and so forth, that I had to go to work. And I like selling cars. I really enjoy it, still do, still enjoy it every day. So that's set my course at that point in time.
Talk to me then about, see, most people, if you have a business failure, that's kind of like what gets you out of a business. You guys went through some turbulent times in the car business early on, and that's when you decided to be in the business. So kind of walk me through those rough waters and what you learned and how that helped you go, no, I want to stay and do this. I really want to work even harder at it.
Well, a strong desire of both of us was to pay off everyone that had any chance of us owing them any money during that period of time, which only way we thought we could do it was to get back in business, because our business, as we looked at our business, it was successful. Even some auditors that looked at it thought it was successful, but with some bankers who disagreed with us. So the way we could pay it all back was to get back in business and really work hard at it, and that's what we did.
What do you do though when you have, you've been shaken up in business, you got people working for you, you got to try to put it all back together. Were people anxious to work for you? Were they reticent to work for you?
Well, I'm sure it oscillated both ways, but there were two people who came back and said, we want to go to work for you. And I said, look, I don't have any money to pay you now. They said, that's okay. I said, we know that we can help you and that you will take care of us. So those two people worked with us and retired after, many years with us.
And stay with you the whole ride.
Yes.
All right, so then talk about how the business started to grow from there, because you had to bring it back from the brink. And I guess there's something in the Clayton name and the way you were raised probably that said, look, if you shook a man's hand or a woman's hand and you made a deal and you said you're going to pay him back, you pay him back no matter what that takes, because your word is the most important thing. Your name is important. Talk to me about holding on to the legacy of your name, but also starting to build what became a really successful business.
Well, of course, you're exactly right. You described it very well, that we had a real burning desire to make sure that everyone was paid and taken well care of. And so we did that, and we were lucky. We had some good friends. We took on the Renault franchise. People said, well, that's not a good franchise to have, but it worked out very well because of the friendship that we had with the Renault distributor, that he helped us. And with Jim's brother-in-law also. We had a number of people that pitched in and helped us to get through it.
And so that dealership became what?
That dealership became Clayton. Well, today it's a used car operation because the Volvo store has moved on. We took on the Volvo franchise in 1958, so we've had Volvo in Knoxville since then.
Wow. What are some of the other brands and car companies that you had through the years?
We had Rambler. It goes back a long way.
That does go back.
We had Peugeot and Renault that I mentioned earlier. We had MG, Austin Healey, early on. And we even had Honda at one point and sold that franchise to Johnny Smelter, in fact, which is now Twin Cities Honda store. And then I had Lincoln Mercury. That was part of the mix. I started and actually built the first two mobile homes, actually there's 12 of them, 12 office buildings that were manufactured in 1970. And then along came the Lincoln Mercury store, and I decided that I wanted in the car business rather than, so we hired people that took over the manufacturing.
Wow.
Time.
So you were there at the inception also of the mobile home company.
Oh, yes.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about that and your decision to stay in the automotive industry and how that kind of branched off. My guest is Joe Clayton. I'm thinking about when I asked you to be on the show, you remember what you said? You said, well, why would you want to talk to me? I mean, you love just being in the background and making it happen, but I'm honored to have you here today. More coming up in just a moment.
Coming up.
If we look around, we can learn, and if we learn enough, then we can make things happen. And that's kind of how all of it developed, I think.
Welcome back to Anything is Possible. My guest is Joe Clayton. So you're in the car business, but along the same time that the car business is starting to emerge, manufactured housing How does that whole thing get started, and what were you and your brother thinking about? What brought you to that?
Well, Jim had purchased a mobile home and lived in it for some time, and it seemed like a good way to live in a fairly cheap housing at that time. And was beginning to spring up all over the country, at least manufacturing was, and retail. So we saw the opportunity. We had a piece of land there. We had a banker friend who was happy to loan us some money. So we started a mobile home retail center there on Clinton Highway. And then soon after that, it blossomed. We opened up another lot directly across the street then. So that became part of the Clinton Highway complex. That was in 67, 68. Then we began talking a little bit about manufacturing, but we were hesitant to do that because everyone who had been in the retail business and manufacturing business had seemed to fold out and go separate ways. So we developed the idea and still thought that we could do both. We could manufacture and we could retail. So as that began to develop then in 1970, I guess we flipped a coin and I lost because I had to start the plant. so anyway, going on into after the 70 then, the Lincoln Mercury deal came along, and so I went with it. But everything that Jim and I did all during the 70s, 60s, 70s was 50-50.
Wow.
All the way up until 1981 when we decided that our children were coming along. They were beginning to go their separate ways into business. Jim's children were going more into the mobile home business, and my children loved the car business. They wanted to stay in the car business. So it became the natural thing to do to split that up at that time, and I kept the autos and Jim had the mobile homes.
You know what's interesting is that you as brothers have done all of this together, that there's kind of a bond where you kind of look out for each other. I've seen you guys around each other. I don't see a lot of words exchanged, but I know when I'm around my brothers and my sister, you just feel like you're at home. There's some kind of energy that makes you feel okay. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yes, it does. I think that he would say the same thing, that I wouldn't be where I'm at today without his help, his assistance, and I hope he feels a little bit the same way.
Tell me about your kids.
Oh, I have 3 great children, 2 sons that are in the business with me, my daughter also in the business with us, and she works in the office. And Mark, my youngest son, is in Columbus, Georgia. He manages the the Mercedes store in Columbus. We did have the Volvo and Subaru franchise there and sold that in 2009. And Rick, my oldest son, manages the Volvo store here in Knoxville.
Wow. I know you recently lost your wife, and I know she was an integral part of holding you close and fueling your success. Any thoughts about her?
Lots of them. Every day, in fact. And in fact, as I was getting some pictures maybe that to share with you, that it really brought back a lot of memories, and she was really a superstar.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about what you've learned about success and possibility. I think as I've been doing these interviews through the years, the thing that kind of stands out to me is people see something and then they just decide that they can do it. Like, I would never think, if I'm living in a mobile home, maybe selling a mobile home, I would never think, we ought to make a plant and build these. Obviously, you and your brother have something that allows you to go, we can do this.
Well, I think growing up as a sharecropper and seeing our dad work hard, seeing him make decisions that kept us going, doing his, we always had food on the table. Now, most of it we grew, but that's all right. We had it. We knew how to get it, and that's what I found. That's what I think Jim found also, that it was, if we look around, that we can learn. And if we learn enough, then we can make things happen. And that's kind of how all of it developed, I think.
What do you think farm sensibility does for you in business? Is there a certain common sense and a certain groundedness that you bring to business that you might not have otherwise? Working the land, coming up poor, when you go into a business setting, do you feel like I want to believe that you might feel like, I don't get distracted by all of the lights and the whatever. I can really stay pretty grounded.
I think it's getting focused and staying focused on what you can do and believing that you can accomplish what you're setting out to do, and then constantly staying focused and working it.
You know, when I interviewed your brother, he said the same thing. I remember after the interview, Jim said, you know, Halloran, you know what I have? What's that? He said, focus.
I think you're staying focused and not bouncing around and looking to see if there's something better on the other side. I think if you, I use the railroad track many times in describing life and business, and sometimes it's baby steps. You step from one side to the other. That's kind of a baby step. But if you want to get down that track fast, you got to take longer steps. You got to take a little more risk along with it. But as long as you stay focused on that railroad track, even if you cross a bridge and there's nothing between the ties, you're still okay if you stay focused.
Stay focused. Wow. I think you've had a life of amazing possibility. I was trying to visualize you and your brother sharecropping and then coming to the moments in your life that you have now and the things that you've accomplished and the people that you've inspired. Because here's the one thing that I know is true about people who live their possibility. When I see a man like you that has come from where you've come to make the contributions you've made, it shows me what's possible. And that may be one of the biggest gifts that people who live their dreams and their possibility give to the rest of us. You show us, hey, stay focused, it can be done.
Well, I agree, but there's been a lot of people that have helped influence that focus down the years. And gosh, I sure appreciate all of that support.
Joe Clayton, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you, sir.
We'll see you next time.